Um, my Hi. My project was on web to boost. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I looked up how to say it, and that's as perfect as I could get it. But here we go. William Edward Burgart de Bus, known as Webb de Bus today, was born on February 23rd, 1868, in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. While he was growing up, Massachusetts was one of the most European American towns. Webb identified himself as a Maloo, which means born from one white parent and one black parent. This didn't stop Webb in his schooling. He was taught by many white people who supported him and wanted him to make it far in life. Something you have to understand is he was born in one of the northern states, so it really wasn't a problem that he was of different color, because back then, of course, race was a problem. Um, it wasn't until he moved to Nashville, Tennessee to attend Fisk University that it really became a problem, and he was introduced to Jim Crow laws. A Jim Crow law was basically in southern states, blacks and whites were separate. Blacks weren't allowed to use the same bathroom as them or go into the same store as them. They had separate things. So this really bothered Webb for more, just because it affected him in his life and in his schooling. Webb went to Harvard University and then did a study abroad program to the University of Berlin. All this was paid by summer jobs that he took and participated in. Webb was the first African American to earn a doctorate degree from Harvard University. Through the rest of Webb's life, he wrote books, was a professor, and helped with speaking out about segregation. In 1905, De Bus was a founder and general secretary of the Nigeria movement, an African American protest group of scholars and professionals. Webb was married and also had 2 children in his lifetime. He was an American hero that should be remembered. Webb de Bus died on August 27th, 1963, at the age of 95 in Ghana. Webb's life and work were an inseparable mixture of scholarship, protest activities, and politics. All of his efforts were geared toward gaining equal treatment for black people in the world dominated by whites and toward marshaling and presenting evidence to refute the myth of racial uniformity. He dedicated his life to helping blacks become unsegregated, to prove that everyone, no matter color of their skin or what race they were from, that they are indeed equal and should therefore have equal rights. Webb de Bus was so dedicated in his life. He saw something that bothered him and he wanted to make a difference in this world, in his world at that time. And he wanted to help people in need, especially the blacks who weren't able to gain an education because of the segregation that was happening in their lifetime. His greatest contribution to education was that he was so dedicated to change. Without this, he would have been just a normal everyday man that went to school and moved on with his life and never made a change. But he engaged in the changing of the world. He had many challenges in his life. When he was at school, he didn't have the same rights. He still moved forward and ended up being the first African American to get a doctorate degree from Harvard University. De Bus was an idol to us teachers because he was so dedicated to what he had to say. In 1905, De Bus was the founder and general secretary of the Nigeria movement, an African American protest group of scholars and professionals. De Bus founded and edited The Moon and The Horizon as origins from the Nigeria movement. In 1909, De Bus was among the founders of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, otherwise known as the NAACP. And from 1910 to 1934, served in it as a director of publicity and research, a member of the board of directors, and editor of The Crisis, its monthly magazine. In The Crisis, De Bus directed a constant stream of agitation, often bitter and sarcastic at white Americans, while serving as a source of information and pride to African Americans. The magazine always published young African American writers. Racial protests during the decade following World War I focused on securing anti-lynching legislation. If anybody knows, lynching was basically the murdering of blacks, and it never really was prosecuted for the whites that did it. During this period, the NAACP was a leading protest organization, and De Bus was its leading figure. I like this quote because I liked how it said, even though it was a hard time, he tried to be sarcastic in his writing. Yes, it was against the whites, but he wanted to reach out to people and be able to speak in a way that they could understand. He wanted to be real and for people to understand what he was saying. I think that this was another great example to the educational field. He was real. He wasn't afraid to tell how it was. He wanted to make a difference, so he did. He also gave others a chance to do so. As you can see above, he gave young African Americans a chance to write and speak their mind also, which I think was a really great example that as teachers we need to be examples to our students, but also give them the chance to speak out too and to help us learn also. Dubuque was also a writer. Dubuque's most lasting contribution is his writing. As poet, playwright, novelist, essayist, sociologist, historian, and journalist, he wrote 21 books, edited 15 more, and published over 100 essays and articles. I tried to look up all these articles, but that would have taken forever. But I think this was a great contribution to the educational field also. He was a great example to us teachers, but also to other Americans. And in a way was the one that started the wave that someday ended segregation for blacks. It wasn't just him, but he helped through that whole process. He contributed to it. All these dedicated people together helped make this happen, and without them, we might still be in this terrible time. Dubuque said, education must not teach work, it must teach life. What a great statement for us and how right he is. Education is so important. Without it, our world would be lost. And that is the whole reason we are on this earth, is to gain knowledge and to be able to teach others and be taught ourselves. So, no, education is not just for working. It teaches us life, how to live, how to be an example. For the young people in his time, he was their voice. He helped them be heard. For many young African Americans in the period of 1910 through the 1930s, Dubuque was the voice of the blacks community. He attacked Woodrow Wilson when the president allowed his cabinet members to segregate the federal government. He continued to fight against the demand by many whites that black education be primarily industrial and that black students in the South learn to accept white supremacy. Dubuque emphasized the necessity for higher education in order to develop the leadership capacity among the most able 10% of of black Americans, whom he dubbed the talented 10th. Dubuque was so concerned that blacks be treated fair when it came to having and getting an education. As a future teacher myself, I think he was a great example. Dubuque cared so much about education that he dedicated his life in helping blacks have the right to a proper education. I think that I can take his example and try to help my students in the same way. I can be dedicated to them and think about their needs. As a teacher, I want my students to look up to me and want to learn and to be interested in what I'm teaching them. But in order for that to happen, I need to be like them. I have to give them the motivation by showing them that learning is fun. I think that it is one of the greatest challenges for teachers today is helping their students gaining the desire to learn. Dubuque said in his article, The Talented 10th, Men of America, the problem is plain before you. Here is a race transplanted through the criminal foolishness of your fathers. Whether you like it or not, the millions are here, and there they will remain. If you do not lift them up, they will pull you down. Education and work are the levers to uplift a people. Work alone will not do it unless inspired by the right ideals and guided by intelligence. Education must not simply teach work, it must teach life. The talented 10th of the Negro race must be made leaders of thought and missionaries of culture among their people. No others can do this, and Negro colleges must train men for it. The Negro race, like all other races, is going to be saved by its exceptional men. How right he is! You can just hear how bad he wants this. He wants to help, and he is not afraid to show people, even in the time he was living where he could have been killed. He still wanted to make change. He wanted to help his people. As teachers in this world today, we also have a voice. We have the opportunity to change our students' lives. So let's take Dubuque's example and help to become a better example for our students. I also made a PowerPoint. I didn't know how to show it on there, but if you just go online and look through it, it kind of had a couple quotes that I saw important and some of the main points that I had. So I hope you liked my presentation. I hope it was helpful for you. And I hope you guys are all having a good week. Thanks. Bye.